Sunday morning in Warren began with the ringing of bells from the First Baptist Church. The town of 25,000 woke up slowly, as was fitting for the Lord's Day. The Miller's Bakery on Main Street was already open, and the aroma of fresh croissants wafted through the air, while fishermen gathered at the Shell gas station, preparing for their trip to Pine Lake. Pastor Stephen Weston stood in front of the mirror in his office at the church, adjusting his dark blue tie. At 45, he retained the good looks and charisma that had made him one of the most influential men in town. The gray hair at his temples gave him a dignified air, and his piercing eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses inspired confidence in his parishioners. Today's sermon was supposed to be special, about the importance of family values and resisting modern temptations. "Stefan, the service starts in 10 minutes. His wife Margaret peeked into his office. At 42, she was still a beautiful woman, although the last few months had left their mark on her face. As a school teacher, she knew every family in town, and as the pastor's wife, she knew every secret in the parish. "I'm coming, dear," Stefan replied, but his gaze lingered on his cell phone. There was a message. "I can't come to work today. I'm not feeling well. Erica." He quickly deleted the message and turned off his phone. 3 blocks from the church, in a small apartment above a vintage shop called Retro Treasures, Erica Rivera sat on the edge of her bed, holding a bottle of hormone pills in her hands. She was 23 years old, but the last few months in Warren had made her feel much older. She had moved here a year ago from Columbus, hoping to find a quiet place to start a new life. Her job at Bean and Green Coffee Shop wasn't the most prestigious, but it allowed her to make ends meet. Erica knew that some of the townspeople suspected the truth about her past. Whispers behind her back, sidelong glances, and sometimes direct questions from the particularly curious. She was born Eric, but that was in a different life she had left behind. Here in Warren, she just wanted to be herself. The doorbell made her jump. Glancing through the peephole, she saw a familiar figure. "Erica, it's me," came a muffled voice. She opened the door, and Stefan Weston stepped into the hallway, looking around. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, a far cry from the solemn preacher the whole town had seen an hour ago. "You weren't at the service," he said, closing the door behind him. "I thought it would be better if I didn't show up there too often. People are starting to notice." Stefan went to the window and peered cautiously through the blinds. "Margaret is asking questions. Yesterday she asked why I go downtown so often." "And what did you say?" "That I'm visiting sick parishioners." "But she's a smart woman, Erica. Too smart." Erica sat down on the sofa, wrapping her arms around her knees. "Maybe we should stop seeing each other. It's getting dangerous." Stefan turned to her, and she saw the same pain in his eyes that she felt in her own. "You know I can't. You're the only one who understands me." Their relationship had begun by chance 4 months earlier. Stefan had stopped by the coffee shop after a difficult day. One of his parishioners had lost her husband, and he had had to comfort the widow. Erica was working the evening shift, and the coffee shop was almost empty. They started talking about life, about loss, about how difficult it was to be who others expected you to be. "You know, sometimes I feel like I've been playing a role for so long that I've forgotten who I really am," Stefan confessed. "I understand," Erica replied. "I've been playing a role for a long time, too." Gradually, these meetings became regular. Stefan found in Erica someone with whom he could be honest, take off his mask of righteousness and perfectionism. And she saw in him not a judgmental preacher, but a man who was also looking for his place in the world. Meanwhile, at the Warren police station, Detective Stella Collins was working on another bicycle theft case. After 15 years with the Cleveland police, moving to such a quiet town felt almost like retirement. The most serious crimes here were bar fights and petty theft. Stella was a woman who trusted facts, not rumors. At 38, she had a reputation as a thorough and honest investigator. Her divorce 2 years ago had prompted her to look for a new place to live, and Warren seemed like the perfect option. "Collins, do you have a minute?" Sergeant Reynolds called out to her. "Mrs. Parker is complaining about suspicious activity in the area around Elm Street. She says she's seen a man visiting the apartment above the vintage shop on a regular basis." Stella looked up from her papers. "And what's suspicious about that?" "Well, she thinks something inappropriate might be going on there." You know how people here love to gossip." The detective sighed. She had already noticed that in small towns, residents had a special talent for turning ordinary events into scandals. "Okay, I'll stop by later and talk to the residents." At the offices of the local newspaper, the Warren Daily reporter Derek Harris was reviewing material for tomorrow's edition. At 35, he still dreamed of big-time journalism, of investigations that could change the world. For now, he had to write about school sports games and local festivals. Derek had grown up in Warren, left to study in New York, but returned after his father's death to help his mother. Now he was stuck here, dreaming of a story that could be his ticket to a career in journalism. "Harris, you had a call from an informant," said his secretary, Dorothy. He didn't give his name, but he said he had some interesting information about our local celebrities. Derek raised an eyebrow. In a town where everyone knew everyone, real secrets were rare. "Did he leave a number?" He said he'd call back tomorrow. That evening, Margaret Weston was washing dishes after dinner when she noticed her husband checking his phone again. Over the past few months, Stefan had become distant and pensive. Their conversations had become superficial, and their intimacy had all but disappeared. "Stefan, is everything okay?" she asked, drying her hands with a towel. "Of course, dear. Just a lot of work at the church." Margaret had known her husband for 20 years. They had married young, full of hopes and plans. Stefan was just starting his career as a priest, and she dreamed of a large family. But after the birth of their 2 children, it became clear that they would not have any more children. This was the first crack in their marriage, although they never spoke about it openly. "Maybe we should go away somewhere together? The children are old enough, and you need a break." Stephen looked up from his phone. "Yes, maybe. Let's talk about it later." But Margaret could see that his mind was elsewhere. She began to notice little things. New shirts he had bought without her knowledge, the scent of unfamiliar cologne on his clothes, strange phone calls he answered in another room. The next morning, Erica was on her way to work when she noticed a middle-aged woman staring at her. It was Mrs. Parker, one of the most active gossips in the neighborhood. "Good morning," Erica said politely. The woman merely nodded in response, but her gaze was full of suspicion. Erica quickened her pace, feeling a chill run down her spine. She knew that look, a mixture of curiosity, condemnation, and fear of something unknown. The first customers were already waiting at the Bean and Green coffee shop. Erica put on her apron and began preparing the morning orders, trying not to think about the sidelong glances and whispers behind her back. She just wanted to live her life, work, maybe make some friends. But in a town like Warren, that wasn't so easy for someone like her. 2 weeks had passed since that Sunday, when Mrs. Parker first called the police. Now she called every day to report strange visitors in the apartment above the vintage shop. Detective Stella Collins decided it was time to take a closer look at the situation herself. Elm Street was quiet, even by Warren standards. Old houses with porches, manicured lawns, American flags on every other front porch. Stella parked across from number 47 and watched the neighborhood for a few minutes. Nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, upstairs, Erica was making coffee for 2. Stefan sat at the small kitchen table, nervously fiddling with a napkin. "Margaret asked me yesterday why I buy coffee downtown when we have a coffee maker at home," he said quietly. Erica set a cup in front of him. "And what did you say?" "That I like to walk around and talk to the parishioners," but she looked at me as if she didn't believe me. Erica sat down opposite him. Over the months they had been seeing each other, she had learned to read his mood from the smallest details. Today, he was particularly troubled. "Stefan, I seriously think we need to stop. The risk is too great." He reached out and covered her hand with his. "You don't understand. Without you, I'm going crazy. For 20 years, I've been living a script written by other people. I preach about love, but I don't know what it is. Not until I met you." Erica felt a familiar pain in her chest. She had also grown attached to this man who saw her not as an object of curiosity or condemnation, but simply as a woman. But the price of their relationship could prove too high for both of them. "What about your family? The church? If everything comes out?" "I don't know," Stefan admitted honestly. "But I know I can't pretend for the rest of my life." Meanwhile, outside, Detective Collins got out of her car and headed for the entrance to the vintage shop. The owner, an elderly woman named Gloria Turner, greeted her with relief. "Finally, the police are interested. I told Reynolds that something strange was going on here." "Tell me more about your tenant," Stella asked, taking out her notebook. "Erica Rivera. Moved here a year ago from the big city. Quiet, always pays her rent on time. Works at Miller's coffee shop. But, Gloria lowered her voice. "There are rumors that she's, not exactly a normal woman. And now there are these men who come to visit her." Stella raised an eyebrow. "Men plural?" "Well, one regular. Tall, gray-haired, well-dressed. He comes in the mornings when he thinks no one's around. But in a small town, everyone sees everything." At the Warren Daily newsroom, Derek Harris finally got the call he had been waiting for. "Are you a reporter?" asked an unfamiliar male voice. "Yes, you called yesterday about some information. Meet me at the Veterans Memorial in the park in an hour. I'll be wearing a blue baseball cap." Derek tried to ask more questions, but the line went dead. The reporter's curiosity was piqued. In 5 years of working for the local newspaper, he had never dealt with anonymous sources. An hour later, he was sitting on a bench in Memorial Park when a man in his 40s wearing work clothes and a blue cap approached him. "Are you Harris?" "Yes. And you are?" "That's not important. What's important is that I work for a company that services the video surveillance system in the city center." Derek took out his tape recorder, but the stranger shook his head. "No recordings. I'll just give you some food for thought." "I'm listening." "Your esteemed pastor, Mr. Weston, has been visiting a certain address on Elm Street regularly over the past few months. Always in the morning, always when his wife is not around." Derek felt his pulse quicken. "And what's wrong with that? Maybe he's visiting a sick parishioner." "Maybe. But maybe it's worth finding out who lives at that address." "Number 47, the apartment above the vintage shop." The informant stood up and walked away, leaving the journalist with burning eyes and a lot of questions. That same day, Margaret Weston decided to conduct her own investigation. She told her husband she was going to the school for a parent-teacher conference, but instead got in her car and drove downtown. She needed to make sure her suspicions were unfounded. She parked at the corner of Main and Elm and waited. Half an hour later, she saw a familiar figure. Stefan was walking down the sidewalk, looking back frequently. Margaret felt her heart sink with pain. Her worst fears were confirmed. She watched her husband enter a vintage store, then saw him climb the outside stairs to a second-floor apartment. Margaret sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. 20 years of marriage, 2 children, a whole life built on trust and shared values. And now it was all falling apart before her eyes. She took out her phone and dialed her best friend's number. "Linda, it's me. Can we meet? I need to talk to someone." Upstairs in the apartment, Stefan and Erica had no idea that several people were watching them. They were sitting on the couch, and Erica was talking about her childhood. "I always knew I was different from other boys, but in a small town in Texas, those things weren't discussed. My parents thought it was just a phase, that I would grow out of it." "And when did you realize it was permanent?" "In high school, I tried dating girls, playing sports, being a normal guy. But every day was torture. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger." Stefan listened, squeezing her hand. "And your parents? How did they take your decision?" Erica smiled sadly. "They still think their son Eric just went away to college and rarely calls home. They don't know Erica exists. That must be awful, hiding your true self from the people closest to you." "You do the same thing," she said quietly. "You hide your true feelings from your family, from your parishioners." Stefan sighed. "Yes, but my deception isn't as radical as yours." "Deception is deception. The only question is how long we can live like this." At that moment, Derek Harris was standing at the entrance to a vintage store, studying the signs and house numbers. 47 Elm Street. According to his informant, this was where something interesting involving Pastor Weston was happening. He decided to go into the shop pretending to be a customer. Gloria Turner greeted him warmly. Visitors were rare in her shop. "Looking for anything in particular?" "Just browsing. Nice place you have here. Is that apartment upstairs yours too?" "Yes. I rent it to a student. She's a nice girl, just... Gloria lowered her voice. There's just a lot of strange things going on around her. What kind of strange things? Well, first of all, there are rumors that she's not exactly a normal woman, if you know what I mean. And secondly, some man has taken to visiting her. An older, respectable man. He comes every week. Derek felt a rush of excitement. The puzzle was starting to come together. Do you know who this man is? No, but I think I've seen him somewhere before. His face looks familiar. Meanwhile, Detective Stella Collins was finishing her tour of the neighborhood. She talked to several neighbors, and the picture began to clear up. Erica Rivera did indeed live quietly and cause no trouble, but the same man visited her regularly. Can you describe him? She asked Mrs. Parker. Tall, around 50, gray hair, well-dressed, expensive car. I never really got a good look at his face. He's always in a hurry and tries not to show himself. Stella jotted down the description in her notebook. Nothing criminal so far, but the situation did seem strange. Perhaps it would be worth talking to Erica Rivera herself. By evening, the atmosphere at the Westons' house was tense. Margaret returned home after talking to her friend Linda, who advised her to talk openly with her husband. But how to start such a conversation? At dinner, she watched Stefan, looking for signs of deception. He seemed pensive, distracted, and checked his phone several times. Stefan, we need to talk, she finally decided. He looked up from his plate. About what, honey? About us. About what's been going on lately. Stefan tensed up. What do you mean? You've changed. You've become distant. You're always going out without explaining where. Do you have something to tell me? There was a long pause. Stefan stared at his plate, gathering his thoughts. Part of him wanted to tell her everything, to free himself from the burden of lies. But another part of him understood that the truth would destroy everything. His marriage, his career, his position in society. I have a lot on my mind at church, he said finally. New projects, social programs. Maybe I really have been paying less attention to the family. Margaret studied his face. He was lying. She could feel it intuitively, but she had no direct proof. Stefan, if you have problems, we can solve them together, but only if you're honest with me. I am honest, he replied, but his voice sounded unconvincing even to himself. The next morning, Erica arrived at work at the coffee shop with a heavy heart. She had spent a long time unable to sleep, thinking about her relationship with Stefan. She knew they had reached an impasse. Continuing to see each other was becoming increasingly dangerous, but ending it was beyond her. Erica, you have a visitor, said Mr. Miller, the coffee shop owner. She turned and saw a woman in a police uniform. Detective Stella Collins, can we talk? Erica felt her mouth go dry. About what? About complaints from neighbors about suspicious activity at your house. Nothing serious, just trying to clear things up. They sat down at a table in the corner of the coffee shop. Stella studied the young woman's face, noting her nervousness. Mrs. Rivera, your neighbors say that the same man visits you regularly. Is that true? Erica clasped her hands together. I have a friend who sometimes stops by. Is that a crime? Of course not. It's just that in a small town, people notice anything unusual. Can you tell me about your friend? That's private information. Stella nodded. I understand, but if he's married, the situation could get complicated, especially if his wife finds out. Erica looked up sharply. How do you know he's married? I don't. It was just an assumption based on his secretive behavior. The detective realized she had hit a nerve, so it was indeed a case of infidelity. Listen, Mrs. Rivera, I'm not the morality police. I'm only interested in whether there's anything criminal going on here. If two adults decide to date, that's their business. But if one of them is married, no one is forcing anyone, Erica said quickly. It's consensual. Stella stood up. All right. I'll let the neighbors know that nothing illegal is going on. But be careful. In a town like ours, reputation is very important. After the detective left, Erica took out her phone and texted Stefan. We need to meet. Urgent. Stefan received Erica's message just as he was leading a Bible study group for teenagers. Reading, we need to meet, urgent. He felt a chill run down his spine. Pastor Weston, are you okay? Asked 16-year-old Emma Jenkins, noticing his pallor. Yes, everything's fine. Let's continue studying the parable of the Good Samaritan. But Stefan's thoughts were far from the Bible. After class, he texted Erica, "Meet me at the usual place in an hour." Derek Harris spent the entire day gathering information. He found out that a young woman named Erica Rivera did indeed live in the apartment above the vintage shop on Elm Street. She worked at a coffee shop and had moved there a year ago from Columbus. She was officially single and had no children. Now all that remained was to confirm the connection between her and Pastor Weston. Derek parked at the end of Viazovaya Street and waited, armed with a camera with a long focus lens. The atmosphere in Erica's apartment was tense. She told Stefan about the detective's visit, and he realized that their time was running out. "The police know about our meetings," Erica said, pacing around the small living room. "Sooner or later, someone will find out who you are." Stefan sat on the sofa, his head in his hands. "I know. Margaret suspects something too. Yesterday, she asked me point blank if I was hiding something." "And what did you say?" "I lied, like always." Erica stopped in front of him. "Stefan, before it's too late, we can stop this. You can go back to your family, and I'll find a job in another city." He looked up at her. "Can you do that? Just forget everything we've been through?" "No," she admitted honestly. "But sometimes love requires sacrifice. I don't know if I can live pretending again, not after I've known what it means to be real." Outside the window, Derek Harris adjusted his camera lens. He had just seen a familiar figure climbing the stairs to the apartment. Even from a distance, he recognized Pastor Weston, the man who had baptized his younger brother and conducted his father's funeral service. "Finally," the journalist muttered as he took his first shots. Meanwhile, Margaret Weston sat in her kitchen with a cup of cold coffee, staring at her phone. An hour ago, Linda had called her with some interesting news. "Margot, did you know there's a transgender woman living in town? My neighbor works at that coffee shop on Main Street and says the new employee used to be a man." "So what?" Margaret replied distractedly. "Yeah, it's just weird, in a conservative place like our town. I wonder how the locals feel about it." After the conversation, Margaret couldn't get the information out of her head. Something about the story seemed familiar. The coffee shop on Main Street was where Stefan supposedly went to socialize with the parishioners. She grabbed her car keys and drove downtown. The Bean and Green coffee shop was bustling with the usual midday activity. Margaret ordered a latte and sat down at a table where she could watch the staff. The girl behind the counter did look unusual, tall, with delicate features and slightly awkward movements, but she was pretty, with kind eyes and a soft smile. "May I ask your name?" Margaret asked, approaching the counter. "Erica," the girl replied, a little surprised by the question. "How long have you worked at Warren's?" "About a year. Why?" Margaret studied her face, looking for something familiar. Suddenly it dawned on her, the subtle scent of perfume she sometimes smelled on her husband's clothes. It was the same one. "Nothing special. I'm just interested in the new residents of our town." Margaret left the coffee shop with a heavy heart. The puzzle was coming together, and the picture was painful. Her husband, a pastor, a spiritual leader of the community, was dating a transgender woman. The scandal would be monstrous. At that moment, the conversation in Erica's apartment was becoming increasingly tense. "We can't go on like this," she said. "Every day I feel people staring at me, whispering behind my back. And now the police." "Give me some time," Stefan asked. "I'll find a way to fix this." "What way? Are you going to tell your wife the truth? Confess to your congregation?" "Stefan, be realistic. There is no way out." He stood up and walked over to the window. Outside, life in the small town went on as usual. Mothers with strollers, pensioners on benches, teenagers on bicycles. All these people trusted him, looked up to him as a role model. And "I've been thinking about this all night," he said without turning around. "Maybe it's time for a change, a radical change." "What are you talking about?" "I could resign as pastor. We could move away from here and start a new life somewhere else." Erica stood behind him, not knowing what to say. Part of her dreamed of this, but another part understood the price of such decisions. "What about your family? The children?" Stefan finally turned around, and she saw tears in his eyes. "They'll hate me, but maybe honest hatred is better than false love." Outside the window, Derek continued to take pictures. He had already gotten several clear shots of the pastor at the entrance to the building and was now waiting for him to come out. He had enough material for the article, but his journalistic conscience demanded that he check all the facts. He dialed the number for the newsroom. "Dorothy, it's Derek. I need to find some information about Erica Rivera. She's about 23 years old and moved here from Columbus a year ago." "Why do you need this?" "I'm working on a story. Also, find out if there are any public records of a name change or documents." Half an hour later, Dorothy called back. "Derek, you've hit the jackpot. Erica Rivera officially changed her name 18 months ago. Her former name was Eric Rivera." Derek felt a rush of adrenaline. The story was getting even more scandalous. A respected pastor in a conservative town was secretly dating a transgender woman. This was front-page material. That evening, Margaret was sitting in the living room when Stefan came home. He looked exhausted and confused. "How was your day?" she asked, without looking up from her book. "The usual? Bible study, a few meetings?" "And where were you after Bible study? I called the church and you weren't there." Stefan froze in the doorway. "I was visiting a sick parishioner." "Who exactly?" A long pause. Stephen knew his wife was testing him, but he didn't know how much she already knew. "Mrs. Johnson, her arthritis was acting up." Margaret finally looked up. "Mrs. Johnson died 3 months ago, Stephen. You conducted her funeral yourself." He felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. Lying had become so habitual that he didn't even remember what he was saying. "Margaret, No," she cut him off. "No more lies. I know you're having an affair. I know who it is, and I know who she is." Stefan slowly sank into a chair. 20 years of marriage were coming to an end in this living room, surrounded by family photos and children's drawings on the refrigerator. "How long have you known?" "I've suspected it for a few weeks. I found out today." "Stefan, how could you? We've been married for 20 years. We have children." "I didn't want this to happen. It just happened." Margaret stood up and began to pace the room. "Happened? Stefan, you're a pastor. You teach people about morality, family values, and you're cheating on me with the person I love," he said quietly. Those words hit her like a slap in the face. Margaret stopped and looked at her husband as if she were seeing him for the first time. "You love her? Yes? More than us? More than your family?" Stefan didn't answer, but his silence spoke louder than words. The next morning, Derek Harris sat in the newsroom writing an article that would change the lives of several people. He came up with the headline right away: "The Secret Life of a Pastor. Scandal Rocks Warren's Religious Community." The article was explosive. Photos of the pastor at the entrance to Erica's house, neighbors' testimonies about regular meetings, information about his mistress's transgender identity. Everything was documented and verified. "Derek, are you sure you want to publish this?" asked Editor-in-Chief Frank Morris. "This will destroy many lives." "I'm a journalist, Frank. My job is to report the truth, not protect people from the consequences of their actions." "Fine, but be prepared for a storm. Stories like this have long-term consequences." On Wednesday morning, the Warren Daily hit the newsstands with a screaming headline on the front page. By noon, the whole town knew about the scandal involving Pastor Weston. Erica found out about the article when cars began pulling up to the coffee shop with curious people. Mr. Miller approached her with the newspaper in his hands. "Erica, you'd better go home. It's going to be a circus here." She glanced at the headline and felt her world crumble around her. Her photo was on the front page, next to Stefan's. The article contained all the details of their relationship and her transgender identity. On her way home, Erica saw people pointing at her and heard snippets of conversation. "It's her. She corrupted the pastor. Wow, she looks like a real woman." The Westons' phone wouldn't stop ringing. Margaret turned it off after the 20th call from journalists and curious neighbors. Her children, Jason and Emily, came home from school in tears. Their classmates already knew. "Dad, is it true?" asked 16-year-old Emily. Stefan sat in his study looking at the newspaper. His life had been destroyed overnight. His career, his reputation, his family, everything was lost. "Yes," he said. "Unfortunately, it's true." 3 days had passed since the publication. and the pressure on everyone involved in the scandal had reached a critical point. Crowds of angry parishioners gathered outside the church with signs reading, "Shame on the false pastor and protect our children." The State Baptist Association had already announced an investigation, and the city council was convening an emergency meeting to discuss the moral crisis in Warren. Erica hadn't left her apartment for 2 days. The windows were covered with thick curtains and the phone was disconnected. Journalists and curious onlookers were constantly outside, some shouting insults. Yesterday, someone threw a rock at the window, leaving a crack in the glass. She was sitting on the floor by the bed, hugging her knees, when she heard a soft knock on the back door. It was a special rhythm, 2 short knocks, 1 long. It was her and Stefan's secret signal. "Erica, it's me," whispered a familiar voice. She opened the door and Stefan slipped inside. He looked terrible, unshaven, with bloodshot eyes and rumpled clothes. He looked 10 years older than his age. "How did you get in here? There's a crowd outside." "I went through the neighbor's garden. Erica, I need to see you." They went into the living room. The apartment was a mess. Things scattered everywhere, empty boxes. Erica was packing. "Are you leaving?" Stefan asked. "What else can I do? I can't live here anymore. This morning, someone wrote pervert on the door with paint. Mr. Miller fired me, said my presence was bad for business." Stefan sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "Erica, I'm sorry. This is all my fault, not just yours. We both knew what we were getting into. But I should have protected you. I'm older, more experienced. I should have foreseen the consequences." Erica sat down next to him on the sofa. Despite everything that was happening, she still felt tenderness for him. "Stefan, what will happen to your family?" "Margaret has filed for divorce. The children don't acknowledge me. Yesterday, Emily said she was ashamed to have my last name." "And the church?" "The Council of Elders is meeting tomorrow to formally remove me. 20 years of service, and it all went down the drain in 1 week." They sat in silence, each thinking about the lives that had been destroyed and the opportunities that had been lost. "You know," Erica said, "sometimes I think it would have been better if we had never met." "Don't say that. These months were the only time in my life when I felt real." "But at what cost? Your family is destroyed. My life is hell. Was our love worth it?" Stefan turned to her. "For me, yes. Even now, when everything has fallen apart, I don't regret falling in love with you." "But I do," Erica said quietly. "I regret allowing myself to believe in the fairy tale that people like me can be happy." There were shouts outside the window. The crowd was becoming more aggressive. Someone demanded that Erica leave the city immediately. "I have to go," Stefan said, standing up. "If they find me here—" "Wait," Erica approached him. "This is our last meeting, isn't it?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. "Then I want you to know that I love you, no matter what." They hugged, and Stefan felt tears running down his cheeks. Then he kissed her on the forehead and walked to the back door. "Stefan," Erica called after him. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Try to live my life if I can." After he left, Erica went back to packing. The bus to Chicago was leaving at midnight, and she planned to leave that night. It would be easier to get lost in a big city, to start a new life under a different name. By 11 o'clock in the evening, she had finished packing. 2 bags and a backpack. Her entire life in Warren fit into this modest luggage. Erica looked out the window. The crowd had dispersed and the street was quiet. It was time to go. She went down the back stairs, trying not to creak the steps. It was half a mile to the bus stop. Erica walked through dark alleys, avoiding the lit streets. Halfway to the bus stop, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw a tall figure in dark clothes, his face hidden by a hood. "Who's there?" she shouted. The figure approached, and Erica recognized the familiar features. "What are you doing here? I thought we said goodbye." "I couldn't just let you go. Please, don't make this any more complicated. I have to catch the bus." "What if I don't want you to leave?" There was a strange tone in his voice that Erica hadn't heard before. Something cold and distant. "What are you talking about? This is all your fault. Before I met you, I had a normal life, a family, a job, respect from people." Erica took a step back. Stefan, you're scaring me. You corrupted me. You made me forget my duty, my morals. Because of you, I lost everything. No one forced you. You decided to start this relationship yourself. I was weak, and you took advantage of that. Erica saw something shiny in his hand, a knife. Stefan, what are you doing? What I should have done a long time ago, ridding the world of sin. She tried to run, but tripped over her bag. As she fell, Erica managed to scream, but the sound was drowned out by passing cars. The pain was sharp and quick, then darkness fell. The body was discovered by janitor Tom Wilson at 6 o'clock the next morning. He was taking a shortcut to work through the alley when he saw a figure lying next to the trash cans. Jesus Christ, he whispered, pulling out his phone. Detective Stella Collins was the first to arrive at the scene. She was already familiar with the victim, the same young woman she had spoken to at the coffee shop a few days earlier. Erica Rivera was lying on her side, her belongings scattered around her. She had multiple stab wounds to her chest and abdomen. Judging by the condition of the body, death occurred around midnight, said Dr. Harrison, the medical examiner who arrived on the scene. The cause of death was blood loss from stab wounds. Stella examined the crime scene, taking notes. Next to the body was a bus ticket to Chicago for midnight, so the victim had been trying to leave town. Looks like a robbery? Asked Sergeant Reynolds, who had arrived. No, Stella shook her head. The wallet is intact. The money is there, the jewelry too. This was an attack with the intent to kill. She remembered her conversation with Erica about her secret lover. In light of the recent scandal, it could have been a murder motivated by jealousy or an attempt to silence her. Cordon off the entire street, Stella ordered. Look for witnesses, surveillance cameras, any clues, and find me, Pastor Weston, immediately. By 9 o'clock, news of the murder had spread throughout Warren. Groups of people gathered on street corners discussing the tragedy. Some expressed sympathy for the deceased. Others said she had it coming. Detective Collins arrived at the Weston home at 10 in the morning. Stefan was sitting on the porch, staring into space. He looked devastated, but not surprised by her visit. Mr. Weston, I need to talk to you. I know why you're here, he said without looking up. Erica is dead. When did you last see Miss River? A long pause. 3 days ago, after the article came out. Where were you last night between 11 and midnight? At home, sleeping. Who can confirm that? No one. Margaret went to her sister's with the kids. I was alone. Stella studied his face. Something about his behavior seemed strange, too calm for a man who had just learned of his lover's death. Mr. Weston, you'll need to come to the station for a statement. He nodded, still not looking up. I know. I'll be there in an hour. When the detective left, Stefan went into the house and walked to the bathroom. He stared at his reflection in the mirror for a long time, then opened the cabinet and took out a razor. There were dark spots on the blade, which he carefully washed off with hot water. An hour later, he arrived at the police station, ready for a long conversation with Detective Collins. The game of hide and seek was coming to an end. The interrogation room at the Warren police station was small and stuffy. Stefan Weston sat at a metal table with his hands folded in front of him. Detective Stella Collins took a seat across from him, studying his face. In her 5 years with the Cleveland Homicide Department, she had learned to read people, and something about the former pastor's behavior alarmed her. Mr. Weston, let's go over last night again. You claim you were home alone from 11 p.m. until morning? Yes, that's correct. What were you doing? Reading, thinking about the future, trying to figure out how to go on after everything that happened. Stella leafed through her notes. Did you watch TV? Do you remember any programs? Stefan shook his head. No, I didn't turn on the TV. Did you call anyone? Send any messages? No. Your neighbors say they saw you leave the house around 10:30. How do you explain that? For the first time, Stefan looked up and met the detective's gaze. Maybe they were mistaken, or maybe they saw someone else. Mr. Weston, I have to ask you straight. Did you kill Eric Rivera? There was a long pause. Stefan stared at the table, and Stella could see his jaw muscles tense. No, he said finally. I didn't kill Eric, but something in his voice made the detective doubt the truth of his answer. Meanwhile, the crime scene investigators were working at the scene. Technician Mike Rogers found several important clues: shoe prints in the mud matching a size 45 man's shoe, and fibers of dark fabric on the fence near the murder site. "Stella," he called the detective, "we have something interesting. It looks like the killer cut himself on the fence. There's blood on the metal wire. I'll send it in for DNA analysis." "Great. Anything else?" "The tracks show that the attacker was waiting for the victim. He knew which route she would take." This confirmed the theory that the killer was familiar with Erica and knew about her plans to leave town. After the initial interview, Stella decided to talk to others involved in the scandal. Margaret Weston was temporarily staying with her sister Linda in a neighboring neighborhood. The detective found her in the kitchen, mechanically washing dishes that were already clean. "Mrs. Weston, please accept my condolences for everything that has happened." Margaret didn't look up. "Thank you. Although I don't know what exactly you're sorry for. The destruction of my marriage or the death of that woman. Both. Tell me about your husband's behavior in the last few days." "He was strange, even more distant than usual. Last night he sat in the garage for a long time, doing something." "What time did you leave the house?" "Around 7. I gathered the children and drove to Linda's. I couldn't stay in the same house with him any longer." "Did Stefan know you were leaving?" "Of course. I told him straight out that I didn't want to live with a man who had betrayed our family." Stella wrote down the information. That meant Stefan had had enough time to leave the house unnoticed. Next, she decided to visit journalist Derek Harris. He met her at the office, looking tired and depressed. "Detective Collins, this is a terrible tragedy. I feel partly responsible for what happened." "Why?" "My article provoked this whole nightmare. If I hadn't published it..." "Mr. Harris, you simply reported the truth. You didn't create the situation. You only made it public." Derek nodded, but the guilt in his eyes did not diminish. "Tell me about your source. Who gave you the information about the pastor and Eric?" "I can't reveal my sources, but I will say that the person works for a video surveillance company. He saw the pastor visiting Eric regularly and decided that the public should know the truth." "Where were you last night?" Derek was surprised. "Here, at the office, working on a story about the townspeople's reaction to the scandal. Dorothy can confirm that. She stayed late too." The journalist's alibi was confirmed, and Stella crossed him off the list of suspects. The next day, the results of the forensic examination came in. The DNA from the blood on the fence matched the sample taken from Stefan Weston during the interrogation. His shoe prints also matched the footprints at the crime scene. "We have enough evidence to make an arrest," said Prosecutor David Clark after reviewing the case file. "DNA, fingerprints, motive, no alibi, but we need a confession or witnesses." Stella decided to conduct a second interview, armed with new evidence. "Mr. Weston, we have your blood at the crime scene. How do you explain that?" Stefan was silent for a long time, staring at his hands. There was a fresh scratch on his left palm. "I cut myself in the garage last night. I was fixing a garden tool." "Strange coincidence, isn't it? You cut yourself on the same night Erica was killed. Coincidences happen." "What about your shoe prints at the crime scene?" Stefan looked up. "What prints?" "Your boots, size 45, left clear prints in the mud next to Erica's body." The detective placed the photos of the prints in front of him. Stefan studied them, and she could see him struggling internally. "Mr. Weston, we know you were there last night. The only question is what happened. Maybe it was self-defense, or an accident." "No," Stefan said quietly. "It wasn't an accident." Stella felt her pulse quicken. "Tell me what happened." Stefan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "You wouldn't understand. No one would understand. Try to explain." "I loved her. I really did. But when it all became public, when I saw my life falling apart, I realized that she was the source of all my problems." "And what did you decide?" "That I had to fix everything. Make everything the way it was." Stella waited for him to continue. "I knew she was planning to leave. She had been packing her things for the last few days, and I thought that if she disappeared forever, maybe I could get my family back, restore my reputation." "Did you go to her house?" "No. I knew the route she would take to the bus stop. I waited in an alley." "What happened next?" Stefan opened his eyes. and the detective saw pain and remorse in them. When I saw her with her bags and her ticket, something inside me broke. All the anger, all the fear, all the despair of the last few days came pouring out. I started yelling at her, blaming her for everything. And then, she tried to leave. She said that was exactly what she wanted, for me to leave her alone. And then I realized that she had never loved me, that I was just entertainment for her. Is that true? No, whispered Stefan. But at that moment it seemed like it. I took out a knife. Where did you get the knife? From the garage. I took it when I left the house. I didn't plan anything specific, just in case. Stella knew it was a lie. He had taken the knife with the intention of killing her. What happened next? She fell and I kept hitting her. I couldn't stop. 20 years of a perfect life, and it was all destroyed because of one woman. How many times did you hit her? I don't remember. A lot. When I came to, she wasn't breathing. The room fell silent. Stella recorded the confession while Stefan sat with his head bowed. What did you do after that? I threw the knife into the river on my way home. I burned my clothes in the fireplace. I took a shower and went to bed. Do you regret what you did? Stefan thought long and hard about his answer. I regret that I let the situation get to that point. But no, I don't regret stopping her. Stopping her from what? From further destroying my life. Stella realized that she was sitting across from a man who still did not understand the gravity of his crime. Stephen Weston's arrest became headline news not only in Warren but throughout the entire state. A former pastor who murdered his transgender lover, the story had all the makings of a scandal. The trial took place 6 months later. The defense tried to prove temporary insanity, but the defendant's confession and the abundance of evidence left no doubt as to his guilt. Stephen Weston was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Margaret sat in the courtroom with her children. When the verdict was announced, she didn't shed a tear. 20 years of marriage were finally over. Derek Harris wrote a book about the case, which became a bestseller. He used the royalties to set up a fund to help the LGBT community in memory of Eric Rivera. Detective Stella Collins was promoted and transferred to the state headquarters. The Weston River case was a turning point in her career. A year after the tragedy, a small memorial was erected in Warren in memory of Erica. The inscription read, Erica Rivera, 2001 to 2025. She just wanted to live her life. Margaret Weston moved with her children to another state, where she started a new life under her maiden name. She became an activist for the rights of victims of domestic violence, realizing that the psychological pressure her ex-husband had been under did not justify murder. In prison, Stefan spent his days reading the Bible and reflecting on his actions. Sometimes he felt he was beginning to understand the monstrosity of what he had done, but more often than not, he still blamed Erica for destroying his normal life. The First Baptist Church of Warren closed 6 months after the scandal. The congregation scattered to other churches, and the building was sold and converted into a community center. The town slowly recovered from the shock. People learned to live with the understanding that even the quietest places can hide terrible secrets. But the main lesson Warren learned from this tragedy was that hatred and prejudice can lead to irreparable consequences. The story of Erica Rivera and Stephen Weston serves as a reminder that love based on lies and self-deception inevitably leads to destruction, and that the price of intolerance can be too high for everyone involved in the tragedy. In the last letter Erica wrote but did not have time to send to her friend in Columbus, she wrote, I thought I could find peace and acceptance here, but some people will never forgive you for being different from them. It is important to remember that the problem is not you. The problem is their fear of everything unfamiliar. This letter was found among her belongings and read out in court. It became the last words of a woman who simply wanted the right to be herself in a world that was not ready for her.